True Cases. I'm Mark Williams-Thomas. I'm just going to bring you an update in relation to the case that we've been following over the last few days, a tragic story that has unfolded now in relation to the death of Constant Martin's child. The police launched a huge search, over 200 officers searching an area of 91 square miles around the south coast of England near Brighton following the arrest of Martin and her partner. It led to the discovery yesterday of the baby. This is a police officer, the superintendent in charge from the Metropolitan Police, announcing that news.
It is my very sad duty to update this afternoon. Police officers searching a wooded area close to where Constance and Mark Gordon were arrested discovered the remains of a baby. A post-mortem examination will be held in due course. A crime scene is in place and work at the location is expected to continue for some time. This is an outcome that myself and that many officers who have been part of this search had hoped would not happen. I recognise the impact this news will have on the many people who have been following the story closely and can assure them that we will do everything we possibly can to establish what has happened.
A tragic loss of life that should never have occurred. Our thoughts remain with the family and, of course, the tragedy of that young child who had a future ahead of them. Anyway, let's move on now to something a bit more happier and fun. I'm joined now by James Dreyfus. James Dreyfus is a star of stage and screen, and you'll know him from some very well-known television programs, but he's also the star of theatre. The producers, Theatre Royal Drury Lane, Lady in the Dark, the Royal National Theatre, Julius Caesar from the Birmingham Rep, for which he would receive the Ian Charleston Award. And on television, he has appeared in quite a number of crime shows. We've got Whitechapel, Midsummer Murders, Waking the Dead, which actually I police advised for over 6 series, Gimme Gimme Gimme, and Thin Blue Line, for which he received the top TV comedy newcomers award. And of course, we all know him for playing Martin in The Bookshop in Notting Hill, which is an incredible program. There we can see him in the Thin Blue Line. Well, James and I went to the same junior school. James went to Amesbury as well as myself, and then James, you went on to Harrow. I went on to Pierpoint. I was actually at Eton recently. I went to do a talk at Eton. Massive rivalry between Eton and Harrow.
You don't want to get them mixed up. You do not want to get them mixed. I've often been referred to as an old Etonian, and my hackles rise. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't have a lot to do with Eton. It was always the sports guys that got to play them and do that. I just watched from the sidelines.
James, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's go through a little bit of history, really, and then bring us up to modern day.
Yeah.
The public school system. Obviously, I came through the public school system and you came through the public school system. Do you think it still very much has a place to play in society?
Yes. I mean, considering the moves to have people there on scholarships from that would not usually be afforded. Yes, I think it's I think that they're amazing places, but in some ways, I mean, I personally didn't enjoy my time at Harrow. It wasn't for me. Public schools weren't for me. I left early, or was perhaps suggested I left early, because I was only interested in acting. So all I did there was be extremely lucky to be afforded such a wide variety of drama, because that was the only thing I was interested in. That and the fact that it was very close to London. So I used to just leave on Friday nights and come back on Monday.
And acting was in your blood. That was what you wanted to do from a very early age.
I sort of discovered it at Amesbury, actually, when Derek Cannon was directing The Servant of Two Masters, which was the first play that year. And then it was, I think, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I played Bottom. And then I was hooked. And then, of course, with Charlie Edwards, did Oliver, which was the icing on the cake. So yeah, I mean, it was the only thing I really was interested in, and it was the only thing I could do.
And you did play a bit of sport. You played in the second team rugby.
I did. You see, this is a lot of people don't know this about me. I was a
No,
very good number 8, which I think was just. I think it was purely down to the fact that I was quite relatively tall compared to the other boys, and actually, you know, I think I was quite strong back then. I did get a good write-up. In fact, it's one of the proudest things I've ever done in my life is to have a write-up in sport.
You've interestingly played quite a few policing roles, haven't you? What have you made of them when you compare that to? And I know that you follow the news, you know, all the time. How have you compared, like, policing on television to the policing roles in reality?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I don't know. I mean, when I watch things, which is all done in a smart room with one computer up on the wall and people are doing all this sort of thing, I always think, well, it's obviously not like that. I think it's probably much more. I tend to watch those programs like 24 Hours in Police Custody, where you get a real.
And do you like them? Do you like them?
That program?
Yeah, I mean, do you find it fascinating finding out what they've done and how the police put it all together?
I find it staggering. I find their patience staggering, because you can see that they're often held back by so many different things. I mean, even a phone call to the CPS could just destroy everything in 1 second.
Yeah.
You know, all the months of work, and I think it's one of the most fascinating programs, because it really does show you the difficulties and the constraints a lot of the time. That and also what I've also found, it's sort of shown a growing sort of attitude to the police, which they have to deal with. An increasing aggression and increasing sort
violence
of
and
yes, and so I find it one of the most remarkable programs.
Do you think you could be a police officer, James?
Do you know, I've often thought about that. Because I think that justice thing is in my head. I get furious. I'm not sure I could take I'm not sure I could be as calm and as rational as learning that my case had fallen through and knowing that a double rapist is let out onto the streets. I'm not sure I have that calm ability to say, right, we have to start all over again. I think
how do you deal with stress? Do you think you could deal with kind of quite serious, complex situations evolving in front of you?
Yes, that I think I could deal with, because I'm quite tenacious like that. I've got a terrier instinct, but I think after being a terrier, you then have to sort of give up your bone, don't you? And terriers don't like giving up their bone to other people. So that's the part I'd have difficulty with. But the actual work itself, I think I'd be quite ferocious about it.
And in terms of morality and the backbone of justice, that's something that runs quite strong through you, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I cannot. I mean, I watch a lot of true crime, as you know, and we've discussed before, and the shenanigans that go on when you deeply. I mean, I'm not saying I know it all, but I know a significant amount. And when you see this backstage shenanigans of what goes on and the technicalities that some cases are dropped on, or I mean, for example, just the case, let's say, of the Ken and Barbie, Carla Homolka, getting to live her life after there was proof on videotapes that she was actively involved as much as Paul Bernardo. That I find those are the things that really get me.
Do you think if you were a police officer, do you think you'd struggle? I mean, do you struggle sleeping? Does the day-to-day you do? Because things worry you and you get stressed about things.
And I dream every night. I mean, but
do you?
Vividly every night, every single night.
Gosh.
And so I know some people do and some people don't, but I dream.
And do you think those dreams? Vividly. Do those dreams do you think they have meaning to them? The dreams?
I think they're trying to put, with the craziness that's going on in the world today, especially if you're on social media, I think it's my brain sort of trying to figure out what's just happened for the last 24 hours, and which makes you get up the next day and think, okay, right, well, I can deal with this now. My brain's processed all that madness. We now press reset and we do it all over again. I'm not sure that, of the messages of the dreams, but I do know, the feelings of panic or the feelings of stress and things, they all come out in my sleep.
Right. Something that we're going to talk more in very shortly, but something I talk a lot about is misogyny in the police service, particularly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where misogyny was such a massive problem. I did this recent program, The Yorkshire Ripper, and it was just covered with misogyny, where you've got the assistant chief constable who led it, who had no women on his team. I mean, in those days, the 60s, 70s, if you were a woman in the police force, you made tea, you looked after you looked after child victims, and that was it. You pushed a bit of paperwork. You weren't allowed part of the senior command team in any way at all. So, and even when it got to the position when we had victim 5 of the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, that was only then picked up by the newspapers when the ACC comes out and says we now have a real victim. I mean, these were working girls in those days, yes, termed as prostitutes. This misogyny that exists, and I worry that there's a growing increase of misogyny that's existing within the police service, driven through some social media. We saw obviously Tate, who was massively driving misogyny, worryingly to impressionable young men. What do you think about that?
Well, there is this growing movement, which has been talked about before, the incel movement, who have been sort of named as domestic terrorists, which they're quite open and blatant about their misogyny. And it sort of seems to be a sort of rather dangerous case of a dog in a manger. If I can't have it, I'm going to make sure no one can. And that seems to be a really growing, I would say, epidemic on social media. But even the other day when I watched at Speaker's Corner, well, Reformers Tree, actually, Kelly J. Keane trying to speak on behalf of women, and watched the bust in Rent-a-Mob crowd silencing them. I was astonished at how meh the police's attitude were towards keeping these women safe and keeping these other protesters back. And to me, I'm afraid that smacked of misogyny too. So I don't think misogyny's gone anywhere, put it like that.
And one of the roles that you play, and we'll see if Jodie can pick up a clip, was this role in Gimme Gimme Gimme, where you played a very outwardly homosexual role on TV. There we are, Gimme Gimme Gimme. That's you playing the role there. And it was a very openly role of homosexuality.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting from that is you seem to get a bit of a backlash from the gay homosexual community when surely what you were doing was promoting something which hadn't really been openly seen on television. It's now very open, but in those days that really was the kind of start of it.
Well, the point that I think not all the gay press, some got it, but a large proportion had a very knee-jerk reaction to it, completely ignoring the fact that this was probably the first time a gay character was shown with being absolutely comfortable with it and just living his life without it being a thing, and also being shown the negative sides of it too. I mean, Tom wasn't exactly the nicest person in the world. He wasn't particularly good looking. He didn't have great big muscles. There's a part of the gay community which is incredibly body fascistic, and if you don't look a certain way and you don't act in a certain way, I mean, it's almost like you're being shunned before Rumspringa. I mean, I'm not sure people would deny that. I mean, I think they've been quite open about it. But I think I had. I think a lot of the press, especially, do not like people being represented. They do not like being represented by someone other than people who they say we'll allow this person to represent us. This is exactly the reason that all the magazines used to put very, very good-looking young straight boys on the front of their magazines, you know, and praising them for saying, oh, they played a gay person. Well, yeah, I know, but you know, you've also got some great gay and lesbian actors and bisexual actors out there who you'd never touch because they don't look or act a certain way that you do. So what can you do?
And when you played the Thin Blue Line, I mean, I have to say, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. When you took that role on, did you kind of think about how it was going to be become such a cult kind of policing style of program? And I have to say, you know, some of the terminology that came from that was just brilliant. I mean, from a policing terms, I was in the police when that was on, and as police officers, we'd often refer to some of the comments that was made. I forget the guy's name, that the inspector. I mean, he came out with some
Grim.
just absolute grim. I mean, he came out with some just brilliant one-liners. I remember there's one line he comes out about when he's talking about Sweeney turning up. Just brilliant.
Well, and funny you should mention that character, because that was my favourite character. And I must say, Ben Elton really excelled himself in giving him some cracking lines. I mean, you know, the man, you know, whose life is absolutely miserable and wants everyone else's life, doesn't understand why. He was my favourite character of the lot. And I remember we just doing the line-up scene. He wanted urine sample, so he was shouting, you know, will somebody take the urine? Would somebody please take the urine?
How do you do that? I mean, I've made lots of telly, but I've never made telly where I've had to laugh. How do you manage? I mean, I've been hysterics. How do you do that? How do you get through it?
Well, what usually happens is they call cut. Let's do that again. So you can do it over and over again. But I think also the prospect of doing it in front of, you know, a live studio audience and have it filmed at the same time, but you know, does put you on your, you know, on your front foot.
Did you think that program allowed you to be you?
Yes, I mean, I considered Goody as in my mind, he was Frank Spencer, who was very married to Betty, and I never questioned.
And did you play it in that style? Was that when you played the style? Was that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Was a sort of he was an innocent child. I was trying to play him more like a child than.
Yes.
And then when people started saying, "Oh, the gay one," I was thinking, "Which gay? There's no gay one." Oh, they mean me. But you know, when you're doing heightened comedy like that, you have to move around a bit, and I was sort of Pike to Rowan's Captain Mannering, so you do have to, you know.
And do you bring that? So when they decided Grimm will be like this and you'll be like this, is this you creating this kind of style? I mean, Ben Elton obviously brings his influence, but are you creating the style?
Well, no, I think you see what Ben Elton's written, which is all very clear, very, very clear. The character is that you either understand the character or you don't. And when I read it, I thought, I know exactly what I would do with that character. And, you know, there was a sort of quite a long audition process of, you know, mixing us up with different people and everything. But I always ever played Goody only that way because I couldn't see any other way. But that came all from Ben Elton's writing.
And what about Rowan? I mean, Rowan plays this most amazing, you know, inspector in charge of it all, who is. I mean, he's just funny by his very nature, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's the man. Well, to me, he's one of my comedy geniuses of all time. My comedy heroes. I grew up watching him, the Not the 9 O'Clock News. I would go and see plays, The Nerd that he was in. I mean, I would see him in anything. And I watched him. And so to work with him was quite an extraordinary. To work with him so young was quite an extraordinary.
And do you think there's any correlation between him and the likes of Charlie Chaplin? Of course, you know, Rowan goes on and does non-talking, no sound. It's just his actions, which is obviously what Charlie Chaplin did in those very early days.
Well, I mean, I think he's up there. Definitely, I would definitely put him with Chaplin. I'd put him up there with my heroes, Laurel and Hardy, as far as physical comedy. He understands comedy. He has funny bones. But it's not just all instinctive. It is instinct, but he also rehearses a great deal and makes sure he knows.
He works really hard, does he? Does he work really
hard at it? Yes, he does. Yeah, he does. But I'm not saying, there isn't the talent there, because the talent is 100%. It's just that he perfects it. He's like Chaplin did. Chaplin didn't just walk in. Chaplin knew exactly where he was going and what he was going to do. So Rowan is up there with the greats.
The Laurel and Hardy. I mean, what a brilliant. I mean, we both grew up in the same era, didn't we? But Laurel and Hardy films were just brilliant.
I mean, and the equivalent to Laurel and Hardy now for me is Ricky Gervais, who if you watch Extras, his show Extras, it's basically Laurel and Hardy. That's their Ashley Jensen and Ricky Gervais. Gervais is Oliver Hardy, and Ashley Jensen is Laurel. If you watch their exchange, I'm not saying it's copied. It's not copied, but that's the dynamic. So I think Gervais is another one who's right.
I mean, I think Gervais is amazing, and I have to say, I watched Afterlife. I don't know if you've seen Afterlife. Have you watched Afterlife?
Oh, I've seen it often. Yes.
I mean, I think what I find so amazing about Afterlife, and I've been through, some real depression. I've been right at the very bottom, and I just thought that his ability to kind of like use humor, but also be in the depth of depression and then come back out of it. I just thought you'd laugh 1 minute and you'd cry the next.
Yeah. It shows I think what it showed was an enormous understanding of the fundamentals of comedy, which is essentially half of comedy is absolute tragedy. And the genius of Ricky Gervais is he's obviously been there. He's obviously understood it. And yet he deals with this in a very sort of non-preachy, very run-of-the-mill, ordinary way. So it throws you off guard. He'd be doing the sort of the famous joke with the ginger fat kid about being a paedophile, and then the next moment he's sitting next to Penelope Wilton, and you're immediately thrown somewhere else. I mean, I thought what he did with that show was extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary. But it's obviously done by somebody who understands the nature of depression and
Derek. Did you watch Derek?
I thought Derek was a genius bit of acting. I mean, especially his acting, because it was never patronizing. It was never. You never laughed at Derek. You laughed with him.
No.
And you laughed.
And that's a really difficult thing to do, isn't it? I think particularly when you're playing a role in today's world where it's so sensitive, to be able to get that balance that you are with the character, but not seeing the character, in a detrimental way.
Absolutely. I mean, but this shows what I think is he's underrated as an actor. People refer to him as the comedian. He's more than a comedian, because his performance in Derek, I mean, he changed his face, he changed the way he moved, but it was all so real. It was so believable, and so touching. His bit with the dog, again, animals and Ricky.
Brilliant.
I mean, you cannot watch that without just losing it. Again, it shows a very fundamental understanding of what it means to be human, and this is what I think is his genius. Is he understands, he understands humanity, and he's a lover of animals, which I mean says a lot to me.
I think there's a moment that I found which I welled up for, and even recounting it now makes me feel sad, which is when he sat on the sofa and he's got the dog with him and the door goes and she comes back to him, the nurse comes back to him and says, "I'll accept you for what you are." And I just thought, you know what? Everyone has baggages in their life. And it was just such a meaningful position when she said, "Do you know what? Yeah, you have got issues. There are some problems with you. You're probably incredibly irritating to live with.
Yeah.
But I love you."
Yeah. Is this Afterlife you're talking about now?
Yeah. So Afterlife. Yeah.
Yes.
Afterlife.
I mean, extraordinary moments. And I also said I asked him once over Twitter. I said, in the early days of Afterlife, you only bought 1 can each day of dog food. You didn't buy a 6-pack.
Yeah. Yes.
I said, you only kept buying 1 can. Was that relevant to the fact that you didn't think you'd make the rest of the day?
Mm.
And, you know, he sort of said, well, I'm not sure. Like all the best, you know, all the best writers would say, well, I don't know. That's kind of up to you to think about that or think. But
And
it's the
we
details.
but we as viewers were watching that and thinking he can't go because of the dog.
Yeah.
The dog
Yeah.
is keeping him because he
Alive.
knows he's going to feed the dog, and if he's not there, the dog doesn't get fed. And
Yeah.
that was kind of one of those pulls to go, do you know what? Animals have that relationship that, you know, sometimes we don't mind what we do to people, but we can't let the dog down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because it's like having a baby. The dog has all the power in the house. The baby has all the power in the house. But dogs are not just dogs if you're a dog lover. They're part of your family. They're part of you. Mm. And so he was caught in this awful situation of not wanting to live, yet being forced to live by 2 eyes and 4 legs who'd looked at him and saying, I'm here. Mm. I'm here.
What do you think about some of the movement now that removes some of the comedy from you know, television, from film, where we've got these woke movement who like go, well, you know, that's not really politically correct?
I think we're in the midst of that, you know, the way, if these people are allowed to get their way, it signals the end of the arts, because what is artistic expression without freedom of expression? If you're going to be offended at every single thing, then, you know, for goodness sake, don't go. If you don't want to see a particular comedian, don't go. But don't stand outside and just because you don't like it. I think the woke movement in the arts, I've always said it, get identity politics out of the arts. And actually, people are beginning to say, I wish it was out of here, here, and here. The more labels we have, the more divided we become, the more everyone wants their own flag, the more everyone, I mean, it's ludicrous. The situation is just ludicrous. I got asked to do a thing for a morning program the other day, debating can posh people play poor people? And I said, yes, just as poor people can play. Acting is about being somebody different. You can. Now, I'm not suggesting blacking up. Of course I'm not. I'm just saying acting is acting. Get your politics out of it. Just get your identity politics out of it.
One of the issues that certainly that's been forefront of lots of people for recent years is mental health. Yes. Do you think that when you are an actor, and particularly when you're dealing with comedy, and you know, and there's a number of, you know, very well-known comedians that I know and I've spoken to, and they really struggle with their mental health because of this conflict between kind of like comedy themselves, trying to joke and everything. How do you feel? Because I mean, kind of you're amongst those who's an incredibly funny bloke, and you know, I mean, when we sit, every time I meet you, James, and we sit down, you know, you don't fail to make me laugh. You know, I could come and meet you, and I could be fed up with life, and you would put a smile on my face, and you know, and that is yeah, that's just gold, and I love it, and I love meeting you to do that, but. It's hard, isn't it? And what about the impact on you?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Mark, because for you know, coming for me, and you know, you get depression, and you've had thing. I've had it too since I was 20 something major, and I'm still on antidepressants to this day, and will be on the rest of my life. But it is a give and take. You know, as much as it cheers you up, it cheers me up. Do you understand? It's always a give and take, and there is this sort of thing that's saying comedians are the most miserable people you'll ever meet, and they probably are. Good comedians, I'm talking about good comedians, because they probably are, because comedy is about, a lot of it is about cynicism, a lot of it is about skepticism, a lot of it is mocking, a lot of it is taking. The whole point of comedy is you're there to not just entertain and make people laugh, you're there to make people think. And a lot of comedians go too far. Hancock, for example, who sort of overthought his comedy so much he was incapable of being funny, and you know, he was an addict, and you know, it all ended badly. But this happens for a lot of people, and I'm not talking about stand-up particularly now. I'm just talking about people who analyze life and who think a lot, and it can be very lonely. Because you think, if I say anything, will I be the one sounding like an idiot here? But so it's a two-way street. When you say, "Oh, I cheer you up," you cheer me up, and this is how it works. You give and take off one another. The worst thing one can do, as I think we've learned, being depressive people, is to isolate yourself.
Yes, absolutely. You have to shut yourself away.
Yeah.
There's been a big issue recently, and I am absolutely in your corner here and join JK Rowling in her corner. This conflict between women and the trans movement. And the fact that there is just no debate that exists. The trans movement are unprepared to enter into any debate. I mean, to call JK Rowling transphobic and to be critical in relation to her, what she said. I mean, if anyone has any ability and any common sense, will know that she is a huge supporter of gay rights, lesbian. She's been incredibly supportive of that. You've come under quite a bit of criticism because you signed a letter, Stonewall, and that resulted in a certain amount of removal from you. This removal culture. Just talk me through. I mean, where are we with that? Are we coming out the other side, or do you think we've still got a long way to go?
Well, for a start, I think we have to be clear when we're talking about this as to when you say trans, what is one referring to? Are you referring to transsexuals who just want to get on with their lives? No, because Stonewall have created this umbrella where 72 different identities are pushed under one umbrella. So if you criticize, let's say, the behavior of a bunch of non-binary people who really have no claim to being persecuted at all, you are called transphobic. If you so we've got to clear up who we're talking about. Are you talking about because I think this entire movement has been hijacked, and I think it's put proper transsexual people in the middle in an awful place.
And who do you think's been hijacked by? So which elements
I think it's been hijacked by I see a lot of bios of these people, and it's been hijacked by I think social media damaged individuals. I also think it's been hijacked by prominent organizations, lobby groups, who have a vested interest in pushing this because equality for gay people was achieved, and suddenly they're going, no, what do we do now?
And it might help sell their publication. I mean, we talked about it, haven't we? It might help sell their publicational profile.
Well, and also the pharmaceutical companies don't do badly either. Surgically. It's essentially what's going on at the moment is a sort of mass conversion therapy of boys and girls. A boy who might be effeminate and a girl who might be a tomboy is essentially saying to them at a very young age, no. If you play with this toy, it means you're a girl. I mean, this is being pushed as an ideology. This is queer theory. This is identity politics. This is, again, and it's.
But this is a real problem, isn't it? This is a real problem for young people growing up. I mean, you and I, they go through a stage when you grow up and you start to reach, early adolescence. And of course, we know that girls reach puberty much, much earlier than boys. Some girls, 9, 10, 11 can reach puberty. And everyone, I say everyone, I don't want to be generalized, but the large majority of people go through some kind of identity crisis at some stage in their growing up. Are you interested in boys? Are you interested in girls, your own sex, whatever? And you understand where that comes from. You start to familiarize yourself. You start to take on board. It's so dangerous when you are still in those deciding periods for people to start to label you and say, okay, well, you should be like this, you should be like that. I just think it starts to remove the general innocence of children. Plus, it also starts to pigeonhole them far too early when actually let them find themselves.
This is the essential. This is the essential mistake that I'm going to say the Q plus movement are doing, is involving children. Do you really think that after all the years we took to get acceptance and equality, that having drag queens come to your party almost naked and slut dropping in front of a 4-year-old is in any way going to make people who have long hated us suddenly go, oh yeah, this is absolutely acceptable. Do you know what it's going to do? It's going to create a backlash, and it's going to create even more extremism on the other side. This is why there's so many people joining the LGBT Alliance saying, look, I've got nothing against trans people who just want to get on with their lives, but what I do have is I have a real problem with the extremist element of the Q plus brigade, who are making it essentially going to make this world a much more dangerous place for all involved. If we're all tied together under an umbrella, we all go down together. This is the problem.
But hold there, because I'm just going to bring Jodie, and Jodie's got some questions for you, and I'll come back and pick it up. So Jodie, you're on mute, Jodie.
Classic. There we are. Yeah, I've just been going through the comment section, having a look at sort of some of the questions that people have been leaving below. This is an interesting one from Deborah Hollis. She says, I thought that's you, James, was brilliant in Gimme Gimme Gimme, big fat hairy bollocks lol. I'm presuming that's a quote. I haven't actually seen it myself. Yeah. Love Thin Blue Line. And then one for you, Mark. I really want Mark to do more investigation series like Reinvestigations. Yes. So there's one there. And here's another one here. People hate on him because his jokes are not always politically correct, but what it is a joke. So much disaster in the world, we should all be able to joke and laugh.
That must be about Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, that is about Ricky Gervais. Yeah. So a couple of questions there, a couple of points that people are raising. Again, if you've got any more questions, people who are watching along, you can put them in the comments section. #AskMark. I'm sure there'll be a slight, maybe there's another 5 minutes somewhere for questions and things. But thanks everyone for commenting. So a couple of things to respond to there.
Thanks, Jodie. James, and in terms of the issue of children, so what I have a massive problem is if you say, or if you go to a psychiatrist or you go and see that and you say my child's identifying as such, they're kind of bound to have to follow that rather than say, hang on a minute, do you know what, is he, is she, just give it a bit of time, get them to see what's happening rather than take them down that route very early on.
Well, there's a film that I think everyone should try and see called Affirmation Generation. It's available online. You can see it, look it up and watch it. And it's the consequences of having everything immediately affirmed. This is all about constant affirmation without pause to question. This is what happened at the Tavistock Clinic, was instant. If your child says this, now listen, if your child, for goodness sake, picks up a pink toy, does not mean it wants to be something. You know, if your child squawks like a bird and eats a worm, it doesn't mean it wants to be a bird. It's doing what children do. I mean, I find it incredible that we say to kids, right, no, you can't drink until this age. You can't drive until that age. You can't get a tattoo until that age. You want to change your sex? Yeah, let's do it age 4.
Mad,
this
is
a madness. It's a madness, yeah. and it's sort of tantamount to child abuse. This is, of course, there are people with gender dysphoria. Of course, there are. So you have to do it on a case by case basis. But this instant affirmation is seriously questionable.
The JK Rowling obviously was very outspoken in terms of her view, and I absolutely support her, and I'll probably get slated for doing that. But I think she's been very clear, and there's been other people. I think Sharon, the swimmer, who came out, and
Sharon Davis.
Sharon Davis, she's come out and said some very clear things, and you as well. What is so sad when you get into those positions is the vitriol, the sheer abuse that people suffer. And I know we've spoken that, you know, literally you'll put something on the internet one night, Twitter, and you go to bed and the following morning you wake up and you've just got a barrage of abuse to go through.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite astonishing. But, you know, I've sort of grown immune to a lot of it, because a lot of it is very repetitive. A lot of it's the same thing. It's the worrying things is my position on anything hasn't changed. You know, Mark, I don't feel I am saying anything controversial. I don't feel that anything I am saying is just 6-7 years ago. People wouldn't have batted an eyelid.
No.
You know, of course, you should defend women who are getting death threats. I signed a letter condemning death threats. I got death threats. It's this mad work. It's this social experiment called this big experiment called social media, which is basically children were used as guinea pigs, young people, and they've been brought up on this. It's led to an entire generation, not an entire generation, obviously, but a lot of young people being utterly narcissistic, utterly entitled, and it's a failed experiment. It's gone horribly, horribly wrong somewhere, because this vitriol I mean, it's staggering in its level of hatred, and I also believe that the extreme pornography and extreme access to anything violent you can get on the internet, you know, you're watching that age 10, that's going to have an effect on some people somewhere.
There is
I don't know what's
massively
going on.
No, I think, and I'm going to pick up that pornography online in a minute, but I just want to read you a couple of funny comments. So coming in from, Red Cloud wants to tell you that her sister thought she was a cat when she was 3, but she grew out of it. Zed Bumblebee wanted to be a dragon. And Kelly says that she's always hated the color pink. I put it down to having shoved down my throat as a young girl. In other words, you know, pink is what you want.
Exactly. But look, young people have always rebelled. What happened in our age? It was done through clothes. It was, you were either punk, or new romantic, or this, that, and the other. Everyone, mods and rockers, and there were different gangs, but nobody, you know, and everyone was against each other, and yet nobody was pretending to be something that they weren't, and nobody was asking to impinge on the rights of another group. People often say to me, "Oh, this is just like the gay fight for gay rights." It isn't. It isn't, because the fight for gay rights was just about asking to be treated equally. It wasn't saying to another group, "You have to shut up. You have to shove up a bit."
But they're so violent and angry about each other, aren't they? You think so? Hang on a minute. Can't we work together as a community? You know, why can't we? Why can't the transphobic work with the homosexual and gay so that we have a united force? But they don't. They kind of have to have this competition against each other.
Well, it's again, unfortunately, I think transsexuals are caught in the middle of this, and then because you're not able to define who these people are. Who, you know, there's transvestite, like Eddie Izzard talks about coming out. I remember him coming out on stage in 1985 on a thing saying he was a transvestite, and I thought, wow, that is amazing. That's a brave thing to do, especially back then. And he was a transvestite, which is absolutely, you know, lots of transvestites always have been. But the difference is now that people are saying, if I say I'm a woman, I'm a woman. How do we get from that to there? That doesn't make any sense. And I'm not going to look at somebody and just sort of be told, I am a woman, therefore you must treat me like a woman. Therefore, I can now impinge upon the rights of a group of women. No, it doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that, especially when it's done so aggressively. And no wonder women are petrified when they get told of the vile things that get said to them. They think, well, you know, it pushes you into a corner. You think, well, I'm not going to go and use the ladies do now. You know, it's ruining the lives of actually the people they're supposed to be representing.
And the other thing which I find very worrying today, and you touched on it, is pornography. So pornography is so readily available now, and I worry massively for young generation, particularly boys and girls, because, you know, boys see this, you know, the sexuality from pornography online, which is very easily available now, the click of a button, and of course they expect young girls to behave in a way that they see on the videos that they watch, and it kind of reduces that level. Whereas, of course, the relationship was go all through their courting process. Now they expect it to happen very quickly, and obviously move to very serious sex very quickly. And I wonder, I feel that it's broken down the barriers to such a degree that innocence and courting period that you and I did as young people has just now been removed and made it much more difficult for young girls and boys. And in a way, it's kind of added to more misogyny.
Yes, it has. It has. It's always the girl's fault. I mean, it's. Oh God, I was reading this story the other day. Oh yes, I don't know if you came across this. It was a story about a 14-year-old boy who happened to be autistic. And on Valentine's Day, he went into class and he'd done a big card saying, "I love you, you're my Valentine's," and presented it to her. And, being 14, he was embarrassed, she was embarrassed. And she politely said, "No, darling, thanks very much, but no, I'm not. I don't want to be your girlfriend." And the backlash this poor girl received for it. And I thought to myself, isn't it interesting? Isn't this sort of sums up how difficult it all is now? It always gets blamed on the woman. Always gets blamed on the girl and on the woman. And in this environment where everything has to happen now, you don't wait a week to watch a separate television program. You want the binge watch it now. And I think there's a massive group of people out there who sort of think that's what women are for. I want it now. Why would we have to wait? Why do I have to wait a year going out with you if I don't get sex? And you think to yourself, my God, this.
And it's worrying, isn't it? And that's the young people of our generation. Those are the boys that are growing up to be the men who think that it's I can take it. It's now.
Yeah, unfortunately. So again, no wonder we're in the midst of a battle that really has never ended. It's just been accentuated.
Have you followed the story of the trans woman, Ida Bryson, who was jailed recently for 8 years for raping 2 women? This is a person who converted without the medical procedure, and was was moved actually to a women's jail, although kept in isolation. Incredible, really. And I have to look at it. I think, do you know what? Where is the women's rights in this? This is a man who wanted to be a woman, converting to a woman, although no medical conversion, and was allowed to go to a female jail. What is the rights for women? I just found that absolutely astonishing. And what's happening in Scotland and what's happened in Scotland, I just say, is just bonkers.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's bonkers. What I really don't understand, we're talking about crime here, as you well know, Mark, and you've been involved in this your entire life. Are you telling me that if a bill comes along which says, look, all you have to do to become a woman is this, and make it very, very easy? It's not transsexuals that are the problem. The problem are nefarious criminal men who will use any loophole available to gain access to what they want. That is the point. It's like a charity box on the side of the road with eggs. Leave some money, take some eggs. There are people who will obviously stop and pay and take the eggs, but there will be a minority of people who come in and will not, and will just steal them. So are we really saying, are we really being so blind to, let's say, or after all we're supposed to have learned after Jimmy Savile and, be wary of this and be wary of that, are we just saying instantly believe everybody now? This is what stuns me about that story.
And in terms of, I just want to backtrack slightly. Doctor Who and the removal from Doctor Who, that was this cancer culture. And I worry, you are an amazing person, and so are so many other people there who come out and speak. And it seems to me that if you have a voice and you come out and say something, you are always, you put your head above the precipice, and you are in a position where it could get shut off. And it's those people that we need. It's those people that are going to stand up and say, do you know what? This is wrong. This is wrong. JK Rowling has faced it herself. She's had some elements of cancer culture. You have had it.
Yep.
How do we stop this? How do we move forward? Because this is utterly unfair. And you received it. I think you found out about it in quite a slow process, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you know, I'd have had respect for them if they called me and said, you're being accused of this, because then I could have explained actually what I did was to do what any normal, decent person would have done, which is to condemn death threats and ask for a debate. But no, they didn't. They did it behind my back, which was really sneaky, and then put out a statement basically saying, we don't endorse transphobia. Well, neither do I, funnily enough. And yet here you are publicly accusing me of doing it. I mean, look at the work Graham Linehan does. The man is one of the greatest comedy writers we have, and he speaks up for women. Okay, he had some trouble in the past, which he's confessed to online, you know, with arguing with people and everything, but he's gone past all that, and he's now, you know, dedicated his life. He's lost his family, and people say to me, why would you do that? Why would you keep going? Because that's all you can do. You can't dip your toe into this debate and then walk away, because that doesn't work. It does not work. You either understand what you're getting into and you commit to it and you do it and you take what you're going to get, because this is a cult. It is a war at the moment. So there's no backing down on my views. This is what I admire about JK Rowling too. If people only knew what she does, if people only
have
knew
you met you do know JK, James?
I know her well enough in the background, yes, but I also know very much of how she supported the LGBT community back in 2004, and I happened to be at the same table as her. In fact, I was sitting next to her, and I know what she does, and to be thrown under the bus like this,
and she has been, hasn't she? She's been thrown up under the bus by the very people
people she stood by.
Yeah.
And I think it's abysmal. And you know, and if you're silent, you're complicit. I'm talking about I'm talking about the lobby groups and everything. If you're silent about this abuse, because I've never seen homophobia going on as much as it is, and it's coming from one group in particular, and Stonewall and these people say nothing. They say nothing.
No.
And so we're not in a good place, and it'll probably get worse before it gets better. But
do you think so? Do you think we've still got an uphill climb to go?
Yeah, I do.
Right.
Unfortunately, I do. I mean, I think these things are always cyclical. You know, the hippie movement, one would have thought that would have lasted forever. Well, it didn't, did it? I mean, it came to a rather abrupt end when something horrific, the Manson family, happened. But basically, that with the Vietnam War brought it all to an end. You know, these movements are cyclical, and these trends are cyclical, and hopefully more sunlight is being shown on these problems, and hopefully eventually a lot of more people will wake up to see what's actually going on.
James, I don't know if you watched Happy Valley, but if you did, wasn't it brilliant?
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, you haven't watched it? Oh, I mean, Susan Hampshire is she's just brilliant. She plays that role in such an amazing way.
Sarah Lancashire or Susan
Sarah Lancashire,
well,
yeah.
Hampshire,
she's just brilliant, isn't she?
Well, she's an amazing actor. It's on my list, Mark. I knew you were going to ask me about Happy Valley today. I knew it. And I thought, shall I quickly go through the synopsis? It's on my list.
You've got to watch it. I won't spoil it, but you've got to watch it. And I think it was why it's so brilliant is it deals with a local community in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, you know, Hebden Bridge and Halifax, and it brings together you kind of like what you want a police officer to have, which is both morality and professionalism, but a heart which challenges sometimes. And we talked about this at the very beginning, is where do you sit? Do you sit in doing the right thing for the job, or do you get caught up with all the bureaucracy which prevents you from being able to do your job? And what she does so brilliantly is you love her, you're with her, and you are there as she does her role, thinking, do you know what? Do the right thing. And she always does the right thing.
Yeah.
ignoring what the policies are.
Yeah, you see, but I absolutely love that kind of thing. You know, you often see that here. I think secretly is what everyone wants to do, isn't it? I mean, just turn around to bureaucracy and say, "Oh, naff off," and do the right thing. But doing the right thing now is so incredibly risky. Risky, but you know what's life for? If you don't stand up for what you believe in, what's the point? You know,
but isn't that what it's about? I mean, you're outspoken, I'm outspoken. You know, till the day I die, I will be forthright in terms of my views. I do it because I've got the background and experience to say it. But I fight the darkest of corners for people.
Yeah,
and I think we have to do that when we have a platform. It's important that we do that. And in the same way as you stand up for the movement, it's really important to be outspoken and look after people. You know, it's amazing, isn't it? When the chips are down, those people who will turn on you will run away.
It is incredible. It is incredible. It is. But I wouldn't mind it so much if they gave me a call and said, you know what, and spoke to me man to man or sent it to my face or anything. But it's all now social media. It's so easily. All you do is you press a block button and that's it. You're done. You're finished. But eventually, I've gained a lot more friends than people who have turned their backs on me.
The people who are the loudest are in the minority.
Yes, they are
always in the minority.
Yes, they are. They are, and I think they know it. And I think, and then don't forget, as the hole in the dinghy gets larger and you sink further and see the louder you'll shout. And these wheels on this particular bus are beginning to come off because I think a lot of people are looking around and going, "What are you doing to children? What are you doing?" And that's who I know everyone will mock me and say, "Oh, why don't we think about the children?" But actually, why don't we think about the children?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is getting lost. No, I've got a question here from you may be able to answer it, you may not, from Kelly, who says, "I love the Striker books and series. Why did JK feel the need to write those using a male nom de plume?" I don't know if you can answer that.
Well, lots of writers do it. I mean, there's nothing just because JK Rowling does it. There's nothing nefarious about it. It's writing from a different perspective. It's writing. I mean, just lots of. It's a normal thing for a novelist to do. I know plenty of writers who use nom de plumes for many different reasons. Stephen King. He writes. He's written some novels under a different name. Richard Bachman, the Bachman novels. Lots of people do it. It's a perfectly normal thing for a writer to do. I can't be more clear than that.
James, when you look back on your roles that you've played, what ones did you enjoy the most? What when you look back and think, do you know what, that was just brilliant? I love that. I loved all of that.
Do you know, Mark, there have been there've been so many. It'd be much easier to give you a list of the ones that I really hated.
Are there any that you would say were kind of you more than anything else?
Well, I think I think playing Cassius in Julius Caesar, I think that's when I was at I think that's what I enjoyed doing most, because number one, it was an opportunity to play sort of nasty and not camp and do the opposite of what I was known for, and I think that was the character I understood the most, and therefore that's the character that I would say I enjoyed the most.
Would you say your heart is in theatre?
No, not anymore.
No,
not while this takeover's going on in the arts. Not whilst all this until identity politics leaves the theatre. Right. I'm not interested. Because everything is censored. Everything is, you can't say. It started to happen when we were doing Candide a while back, and I noticed signs of people objecting to this and objecting to that, and I thought, this isn't going to go anywhere good.
Do you know, I went to the ballet the other day. I went with my partner to Swan Lake, and when I went, I thought, is it me? Will I enjoy it? I have to say, it was brilliant. It was kind of one of those moments where I was literally able to put aside all my madness in my life, watch it, and
Yeah.
just get utterly engrossed in it. I mean, so much so, I'm an utterly hooked now. I've only been once, and maybe I'll change if I went the second time. I loved it.
Yeah, and listen, it's a great, but isn't that the point? You went to watch something to take you out of all this madness. At the moment, a lot of theatre tends to keep you in it.
Yeah.
I hope, it's like watching the television now. You know, you think at a time it's so awful and stressful as the times we're living in at the moment, where people have been through so much and said, why is there not escapist, more escapist, fun, lunatic stuff onto? We're being fed a litany of misery and you think to yourself, what's wrong? What is wrong? Because we're censoring ourselves into such a little box by saying it might offend, it might offend, it might offend. Well, everything might offend somebody, so you might as well just give it all up. No,
Yeah.
we're going to fight it. We're going to fight it.
And James, what have you got going on at the moment?
I've got a few things. I've got there's a film coming out this year. Which the name hasn't been decided on yet, but it's quite a good film. It'll probably be on Netflix, and it's got a very popular young actor in it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm doing a film called Cara with Black Octopus Productions. And another thing, and a couple of other things that I've been told, please don't talk about at all, because you'll just ruin it.
Welcome to my world. When someone says to me, "What are you working on?" Like, well, I'm working on this, and it's like,
your world's slightly more serious than my world.
James, you are brilliant. Listen, I love you, James. I think you're an amazing person. I look forward to. Let's get a date in the diary. Let's go and have another meal. Look after yourself. Thank you.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, go have lunch. Look after yourself.
Thank you.
You've been brilliant as always. Thank you so much, James Dreyfus.
Thank you.